Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first Crime Scene Insiders podcast.
Woohoo!
We're really happy to be here. We're bringing to you a brand new podcast, but with a CSI twist, and that's because we are ex-crime scene investigators. So I am one of your hosts, Angela Davies, and I'm here with my co-host, Dionne Watson, and we're hoping to bring something a little bit different to the true crime podcast world by looking at some of the realities. But I think first things first, what we should do is kick off and introduce ourselves a bit, talk a bit about our experiences, how we came to be here, and also what we hope the aims of this podcast will be as we move through time and that kind of thing. Hopefully, inviting you in to come on our journey with us. I think that sounds like a good plan, Dee.
Yeah, good place to start at the beginning.
The beginning is always a very good place to start. Do you want to kick us off with tell them a bit about our experience?
Yeah, so myself and Ange met back in 2005, which we only recently realised is 20 years ago and feels like a lifetime now.
Well, in some ways it's flown by, and in other ways it feels like a lifetime.
Yeah, very true. We've had
20
a lot of
years is
fun along the way.
we have had a lot of fun. That's very true. Maybe we should have a 20th year party.
I think that's a good idea.
That's a good idea, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll put that in the calendar after this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we met back in 2005 at Teesside University, where we were both studying a crime scene science degree. And then we both went on to work for a local police force directly after that, after successful graduation. And although we met at university, really our friendship really formed when we started working for the police together as well, didn't it?
It did, yeah. We got on at university, but kind of had different friendship groups, didn't it? And then
Yeah,
in the police, that's where we formed a strong bond when we were working together.
Yeah. I think we sometimes joke and say that it's probably a good job for both of us that we didn't meet at university.
Most definitely.
Not sure those graduations would have happened.
No. Maybe not. Not that we have too much fun.
Not that much. Yeah, so we went to work for a local police force, like I say, after that. We had slightly different routes in. So Angela started straight away as a scenes of crime officer, and I started as a volume crime scene investigator. And it was a bit of a different role when I first started. It was a new initiative, and it was part of what we called the workforce modernisation. And it was basically seeing how roles could be kind of streamlined.
Yeah.
So I would attend any scenes where we thought there was a potential of forensic evidence being found at any volume crime scenes. Um, but also, I would attend as a first officer. So I would take statements from the victim about what had happened. I'd take that initial report. And then I could also do things like the house to house inquiries and any CCTV inquiries as well, which is quite unusual, isn't it, for that sort of role?
It is definitely, because those kind of roles usually fall down to the police officer, don't they? The officer in charge of the case, usually.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
it's a unique position.
Yeah, it was a very new thing. I think it was the first year that it had ran when I went in with that intake. So it was really interesting because we would attend scenes in the first instance, like I say, take all the first report and do those initial inquiries. But also it meant that we were first on scene to protect that evidence in the first instance. So we weren't waiting on somebody else coming out as well. So it was a really interesting way to start it. I think it was
great initiative, I think.
Great initiative, yeah. Unfortunately, it got disbanded a few years later, but in the few years that it was running, we were actually getting some really good results from it. And I think that was because you've got a forensic practitioner going out straight away, so you haven't got that chance of contamination happening before anyone else gets in the scene.
What are you trying to say, Dionne? The frontline officers sometimes contaminate crime scenes.
I would never imply that.
No.
Yeah, so it was a really good initiative, and we did get some really good results, especially from, like I say, considering we were just attending volume scenes as well. So it was really good, really interesting. But I did a year in that, and then I became a full scenes of crime officer along with Ange as well.
So many names, isn't it? Scenes of crimes officer, SOCO, CSI, scientific support officer. They're all one in the same thing, really, aren't they? You go and investigate crimes. But when we
Yeah,
were in, we were called SOCOs, scenes of crimes officers, working in the scientific support department.
yeah,
Although there was a big shift and move across to CSI or crime scene investigator because the I think the shift was made because we are investigators. We're not just there as officers, we are actually investigators and a significant part of the investigation team, which is why I think they tried to shift from SOCO to CSI.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I went straight in as a crime scene investigator. So I was doing all levels of crime from the off, so from volume crime to major and serious category crime. Because in your role, you couldn't at that point attend major crime scenes, could you? It was
No,
just
just
volume
volume.
crime. Yeah, whereas I was doing volume, major, and serious category crime scenes from the get-go, which I have to say, as a new graduate, was a little bit unnerving. We went in and we did 3 months shadowing with an experienced crime scene investigator. And after that 3 months, we got a tick in a box, and then that was it. We were out on our own doing all sorts. And I remember my very first job I was called to on my own was a ransack burglary, but it was
Wow.
high value as well. And the whole place had just been torn to shreds. And I walked in and I was just like, oh my God, where do I start? What do I do? So it was really nerve wracking. And then my very first time on call, I got called out to an assault and a stabbing.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, you get that call and they're like, you're the on-call scene investigator. Like, yeah, okay, we've got a stabbing. And you just think, oh shit.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
call someone more experienced, please? It's like, no. Of course, we did have a crime scene manager that we could call and get to come down if we needed. But yeah, I remember those kind of first days in as a crime scene investigator were quite nerve-wracking at times.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm. So, did you enjoy the jump to full scene investigator doing other crime scenes as well? Were you ready to move from that volume role to the full CSI role?
Definitely. Like I say, I did enjoy that role, and it was great, the breadth and the different things that you did as part of your role. But I think to move on to the next level of scenes it's way something where you can get your teeth more into it, isn't it?
In terms of investigation, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. So I think I was ready. Yeah, the volume stuff was enough for me. I was more than ready to go on to the next step. Yeah.
But the thing is, there's not that many CSIs that can say that they've done a first attending officer's role where they've gone out and taken statements and done CCTV inquiries and preserved and examined the scene from the off.
Yeah,
It is really unique role.
it was really interesting to experience that side of it, I think. Yeah.
I think that the time that we were in to now, things have changed in the recruitment process. So now, as you go in, there is a very tiered structure, isn't there? So they have what you call tier one, tier two, and tier three scene investigators. I think that's nationally these days. So it is a bit different. So, like I said, when I went in, I was kind of dropped in it after a couple of months of shadowing, but that wouldn't happen these days, I don't think. I think people start off as a volume crime scene investigator until they've attended so many scenes and passed a portfolio, and then they move up. So I'm not sure which is the best way sometimes to kind of drop
Mm,
you in at the deep end and just sink or swim, or to kind of have that more nurturing approach.
I
I
know,
don't
yeah.
know.
It's
I work
difficult, isn't it?
it is. I work really well under pressure, so even though I
Yeah.
was a nervous wreck for the first few months, I learned fast, really
Yeah.
fast.
You have to in that situation, don't you?
Yeah, you really do.
I think the other thing that we were lucky with as part of our training, as we attended the post-mortem as well, didn't we?
Oh yeah, Jess.
So, or so Ange thinks. Yeah, so Ange thinks still.
Still called
Yeah.
Jeff.
Yeah, we had to attend a post-mortem, and it kind of give us, like you say, it's that sink or swim thing, isn't it? But in a safe setting. So we got to be there and experience it, and then we knew if we were able to deal with the sights we were going to see, because it's one of them ones that you cannot see as part of like a training or through a degree or anything, isn't it? Until you physically see that, you don't know if you can cope with it or not, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's something else that's really interesting because people go in from different levels these days. You don't necessarily need a degree to be a crime scene investigator. We did go down the degree route, and I personally think, well, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but for me, it served me well. I enjoyed the learning, but also we, as well as doing all the crime scene stuff and all of the practical elements of it and learning how to do all the field work in a controlled environment, we also got to learn all the scientific information and knowledge behind it, which I think helps to make you a better investigator because you know why you're doing the things that you're doing. You have a real understanding of what's going to happen once you've recovered the evidence and sent it off to the lab. You know what you're recovering and why you're recovering and the methods that to be used and what methods are going to be used on it later down the line. So I think that it gives you a full depth and breadth, at least the degree that we did.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
but we didn't get, like you say, to do post-mortem or anything like that, and you don't in your degree. I think some degrees now are working with the medical
Mm.
school, so people can go into the medical departments and see cadavers and stuff, but nothing really prepares you for it. And it's interesting because you go into force, you go through the recruitment process, and then you're recruited. And if you can't face those sites,
Yeah,
you're a bit buggered, really, aren't you?
yeah. And I think it was the case that before we started, maybe the intake before us, they did have people that couldn't
Couldn't
actually cope
cope.
with the sights, and once they'd seen that, were like, okay, that's not this job's not for me, and then left.
Yeah. I think that the trouble is some people see crime scene investigation as glamorous.
Yes.
I think because of the TV often.
Mm,
Yeah, I think people think it's a real glamorous job or I mean, I was going to say really it is really interesting, but I don't know that people get the realities behind it and the day-to-day grind and actually the things that you're seeing as a constant, like some of the worst of humanity day in, day out, and
yeah,
some of the most disgusting, horrible sights and smells that you'd ever wish to see, really.
yeah, definitely. I think that's one of the things that we're going to bring into this podcast, isn't it? Dispel some of their myths within it and show some of the realities. Well, not show so much, discuss.
Sure. Yeah.
Discuss some of those realities. So bringing our background in and showing people actually this is what the reality of crime scene investigation is.
And I think that's what we've got to bring to the true crime podcast world, isn't it? We
Yeah,
want to look at true crimes, but from a practitioner, from a CSI's perspective. So we are going to talk about true crimes and true cases, ones that we've worked on, but also historical ones that we haven't gone back years, and also current ones that are in the press and ongoing. We're going to follow a lot of true crime cases but put that CSI perspective on it. And I think that's really the aim of the podcast and what we want to do is share our accumulated years of experience. Because between us, we attended thousands of crime scenes, didn't we?
yeah, we did.
It used to be back in the day you could go between 8 to 12 crime scenes in a shift, and you were working between 9 and 12 hours and 6 days a week. We used to do, didn't we? 6 days on, 2 days off.
Yeah, yeah.
And when
So it
you
was a
add that up
lot.
over a year, it's a lot of crime scenes, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Especially the sorts of areas we worked in, there were busy areas, weren't they? So we seen a lot.
We we certainly did. Some lovely things. Yeah.
Some lovely things. Um, the other side that actually we haven't mentioned, mentioned our experience within police forces, but actually we also are mass disaster consultants as well, aren't we?
Yes, for our sins.
Yeah.
Uh,
So our experience has really been in the air disaster arena, and we've both attended several different incidents, so we have experience in that side of things as well.
yeah. Maybe we can talk about the difference between a mass fatality to a single fatality. It is quite a big difference, isn't it?
Definitely.
So we want to bring all of that to the podcast, as well as also bringing on other specialist forensic guests. We've got quite a lot of friends and colleagues in the field who we think will have some really interesting insights and cases to share with us as we move through the podcast, and hopefully it grows, because what we really want to do is get into that nitty gritty of true crime or crime and working on criminal investigations and take people underneath that barrier tape, don't we?
Yeah,
Because we are quite fortunate. I don't know, it depends. A lot of people love true crime, they love crime and they find it fascinating, but not a lot of people get to go underneath that barrier tape.
yeah, that's very true. Yeah. So I think talking about, like you say, from the true crimes, but actually from a practitioner perspective and telling people some of the realities and what we'd be thinking at that time and the sort of different evidences we'd be looking at, I think will be a real interest and eye opener for people.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that we should put like a warning in here. Mainly a warning about us. We're a problem. So we are going to be quite hard hitting. We're going to be quite, well, not quite, we're going to be real and authentic about our experiences, but also we do have a really quite a dark sense of humor. A dark sense of humor is often a way that crime scene investigators and actually lots of frontline responders, if you speak to police officers, paramedics, fire officers, you'll quickly find out that they've got quite dark senses of humor, and they are usually coping mechanisms, aren't they?
Definitely.
And sometimes ours just comes out and we can't help it. So if you're easily offended, this is probably not the podcast for you.
Probably not. But if you
But
love true crime, if you want to learn more about the realities of it, if you've got a bit of a dark sense of humour and are up for a bit of a laugh, then I think we're the podcast for you.
definitely, yeah, it is going to be a fun podcast despite the dark subject. It's a dark, macabre subject, but there's going to be fun along the way.
Definitely.
And 20
Definitely.
years later, we'll still be here having fun.
And again, it will still look as fresh faced.
Yeah, not age a bit.
So we've talked a bit about our background there and a bit
Mm.
about the aims of the podcast and what we think our listeners are going to get from here. Um, I think it might be interesting then to hear why we became CSIs and where our interest for this field come from. So do you want to fill her in first on that, Ange?
Yes, happy to. I Well, I was a bit morbid from a young age, really, and it all started.
This does not surprise me.
It all started at about the age of 6,
Oh, wow.
when I saw my first dead body.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a neighbour who'd passed away, and I went. I'd been clearing his driveway of snow, and I'd finished, and I knocked on his door, and there was no answer, and my nana's dog rang. But so I went in, and there he was, and I was 6. I'd never seen a dead body. I didn't really understand death, but I was kind of fascinated. And I had a friend with me who ran off to get some help. But I tried in my childhood wisdom to give him CPR.
Oh
Bless
my
him.
God.
Oh
You once
no.
switched on 6-year-old.
Oh, I did. I tried to give him CPR. So it was the first time that I'd I saw a dead body, but also felt one. And I kind of became a bit fascinated after that. I remember being upset, but I also remember sitting on the stairs and watching out the window on our landing of the funeral director coming to take him away. And I was just totally fascinated. And then as I got a bit older, I worked in a supermarket opposite a funeral director's.
My God. I
I
feel like this
know.
is the making of a serial killer, not the
I
start of
mean, I
a true
might
crime podcast.
could be, couldn't I? She's a little bit psycho. Na, 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 na. Oh, no, we do no singing on the podcast. Yeah, so I was fascinated. I used to watch the funeral directors come in and out with the coffins, and I always wanted to kind of get in there. Which
In
I
the
know again
coffin
is
or the funeral directors?
definitely the funeral directors. I just wanted to know more. Um, as I moved into secondary school as well, I had an amazing science teacher, Mrs. Tomlinson. She was fantastic, and I remember her saying to me, "Have you ever thought about being a forensic scientist?" And I was like, "Nope, I don't even know what forensic scientist is." She said, "I think you'd be really good at it because you're great at science, and more to the point, you never stop asking why." I think I was a bit of a nosy kid. I am nosy. I think it's one of the good qualities to be a scene investigator. She said, "You're always asking why. You're really interested in things in the world around you. You're really good at scientists. I think you'd be a great forensic scientist." So at that point, I went off and did some reading around. And in those days, we didn't have the internet. So I had to go to a library. And there also wasn't a great deal of material on forensic stuff. But I discovered some information and found out what it was about, and it was solving crimes. And there were also a number of things going on around me at that time in my early teenage years that were very difficult and very challenging and not right. And I realized that forensics was all about solving crimes. And all of a sudden, I wanted to be part of that arena. I wanted to help solve crimes. I wanted to help catch bad guys. That's what I wanted to do. There was a lot of injustice and awful things going on. And from a really young age, I think I've had this thing inside of me where injustice makes me really quite mad. And I've
Yeah.
always wanted to kind of battle it and fight it. So originally, I wanted to be a forensic biologist. And I was fortunate enough, I must have gone on and on about it quite a bit to my teachers. And a few years later, I was 16, and my head of English, strangely, not science, but my head of English had a contact in Cleveland Police. And he knew the detective chief inspector, who was, I think, head of scientific support at the time. And he managed to get me a work placement in Cleveland Police.
Brilliant.
And yeah, I was so lucky and so fortunate because not many work placements were given at that time. And it was a really difficult, it's still difficult now to get a work placement in crime scene and forensics. Let's face it, it's hard.
Yeah.
Because of the sites you see, probably because of the insurance, you have to be of a certain age. 16 was quite young, but I was overjoyed. I was absolutely overjoyed. And I had a really great insight because I did 2 weeks there and I got to spend some time in the photography department. I did a few days in the old photography department. Then I did a few days, I got took down to Weatherby Forensic Science Labs. And I realized that I didn't know that the laboratory was the place for me. It was quite, oh, I shouldn't say this, should I? Really sorry to all our forensic scientist friends. The laboratory was a bit stuffy, quite
It
clinical.
depends what you're into, doesn't it? Some
It
people love that,
does.
and it's not for others.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
exactly. Yeah. And so I got to spend some time in the labs. And don't get me wrong, I met some interesting people and the work they did was fascinating. I don't know, it didn't sit right with me. But then after that, I spent just over a week with the crime scene investigators out in the field. And oh my God, I absolutely loved it. And I
Yeah.
just knew from then that it was crime scene investigation. I was interested in the whole umbrella of forensics, but I wanted to be a crime scene investigator. And it was difficult for me because I've got a disability, as you know. I was born with a dodgy leg. And that meant that I couldn't get into the police force to be a crime scene investigator because back in those days, so I'm going back to the 90s now, I'm going back a really long way.
You are showing your
Showing
age.
my age, I know. We've known each other 20 years, but I'm way beyond that anyway. So I back in the 90s, police officers were the crime scene investigators. It wasn't a civilian role. So I got really good feedback from the DCI that had hosted me. He suggested that I'd go to uni and do a scientific degree and do something with photography, and just kind of watch the field and watch the space, really. So I did that. I went off to uni and I was looking again more at the forensic side because I didn't know if I'd ever get into the police as a CSI. But I did biomedical science
Okay.
and photography because back then, again, there wasn't many forensic degrees around. There are so many forensic degrees now, it's unbelievable. But at that time, there weren't very many at all. So I did a biomedical science degree, which had forensic modules in it. I also did photography. And I have to say, I didn't thoroughly enjoy that time at university. No, that's a lie. I loved university, some of the best years of my life, but I didn't entirely love that course. And probably because it was heavily lab based and I'd already established I'm not really a lab person,
Got
I'm
you.
much more of a field person. Um, so anyway, my career ended up taking me in a couple of different paths, and then I went into pub management and did a couple of other things. And then
Good
one,
skills taught there, though, I
yeah,
bet.
definitely in pub management, you were
Yeah.
dealing with all walks of life in there, having to communicate with people on all levels. So
Which is a huge part of the CSI role anyway, isn't it? So it's great skill set to pick up to go into the role with.
definitely, yeah, you do learn a lot of different skills out. And I think that's the other thing as well. And some of the debate about do you need a degree to be a crime scene investigator? I think in reality, the answer's no. If you've got,
Ooh.
oh, I know, do, do,
Oh,
do. Woo, woo,
some of our
woo.
academic colleagues will be red lighting
You what?
that.
No. Well, I think crimes to be a crime scene investigator, you've got to be meticulous and have a methodical way of working and thinking, be quite logical, be able to think outside the box, be a problem solver, a great communicator, be able to
Yeah.
organize your skills. Those kinds of things, those soft skills, I think, are much more beneficial than the degree, really. Anyway, I did lots of different things, and all the time I was still looking to see if I could get in. There was a training course up at Harpley Hall, and I was trying to pay for it myself and get on up there. Again, they weren't really accepting civilians, but I was thinking where there's a will, there's a way. And then eventually my mum called me one day and she said, have you seen that Teesside Uni? You're doing this degree in crime scene investigation. She said it looks really good and they seem to be leading the way in it at the moment. So I did a little bit of research and moved back to Teesside. So I'm originally from Middlesbrough, originally from Teesside. I'd gone off to uni down in Sheffield and in South Yorkshire, and I was living in and around South Yorkshire. And then I moved back to Teesside to do the degree, and then that's where I met you, and voila.
And
That's
here
how I
we
got into
are.
it. A little bit long-winded, but there you go. And here we are, like you say. What about you?
um, so when I first started out, I always knew I loved science. I was always going to do
Mm.
something in science. But when I was younger, I kind of wanted to combine my love of science and my love of animals. And I
Oh,
I thought that I would either like to be a zoologist or a marine biologist, leaning more towards marine biology. So I went to college and started some A levels with some science based ones in there. Um, and my college did a lot of nighttime courses in different topics, which I'm extremely grateful for. Um, I think if ever you get the chance to do something like that whilst you're trying to pick your career, it's really useful to do.
definitely.
So I did a 6 week course in marine biology and on a night time, and it was just not for me. It was so far removed from what I thought it would be. So it just a lot of it, like you say, lab-based and things as well. And I just wasn't enjoying it. And then I was a bit stuck because I'd already put my application for university and everything in, and I just
Uh,
didn't know what I wanted to do at that point. And quite similar to your journey, I had a really good science teacher. She was my biology teacher, and she also did environmental science as well. And she had me for both of those classes. And she sat down and had a word with us and said, she, similar to your teacher, said, have you ever thought about forensics or crime scene? She said all the experiment side of things that we do, you get really into. You're always wanting to know more and asking why, and you've got the logical thinking for it. I think it would be a really good career for you. It would suit your skills. So I hadn't even heard much at that stage about crime scene or forensics. I think I must have been living in like a little dark box somewhere to have not. 'Cause CSI and stuff was massive at that point, but no, I hadn't seen any of it. So they were doing a nighttime course in that, so I went along and I absolutely loved it. And I just knew, I was like, yes, this is a bit of me. This is where I want to go. Um, and again, similarly to yours, it's strange how close our paths have been in ways. Um, our teacher who'd put this course on also knew the trainer for our local police force for the crime scene side of things. So she had a word with him and said, I've got someone who I think would be really good. She's figuring out a path. Would you be happy to take her for a placement? And luckily enough, I got a placement as well. Mine was just a short one. I think it was just 3 or 4 days. Um, and I went straight into the crime scene unit and went out with them for a few days. And I just loved it. Absolutely loved getting out there, meeting the victims of crime, help. Like, you feel like you're really helping people when you're out in that as well, don't you?
yeah, definitely.
And seeing the crime scene investigators in action, I was just like, this is it. This is definitely what I want to do. So then, because my application for university was already in, I had to go through clearance. So I had to hope there was still spaces left
Whoa,
on the
that must have been a
course.
nerve-wracking time.
It was very nerve-wracking. And thankfully there was. And then that's when I got onto the course and again, met yourself.
That's where
So
we met.
that's where we went. So yeah, but it's interesting that both of us have had science teachers who've actually recognised our skill sets and then went, actually, I think this would be really good for you.
It's amazing what a good teacher can do for you, isn't it? It really is.
Definitely make a world of difference. So if Miss Donaldson's still out there, this is all thanks to you.
Yeah. And it is a great job, isn't it? It is, I think, one of the best jobs in the world, dare I say.
I think so. If you enjoy variety in your role and not knowing what you're going to do each day and being out and about, then yeah, I think a very good role.
It is definitely. I don't think people realize that it's it's quite like it can be quite a lonely job. You do a lot of solo working, don't you? So you will work
Yeah,
in teams um at major crimes. So I guess some of the crimes that we can attend would be what we call volume crime, and we call them volume crime because they happen en masse, they happen daily, at high frequency. They affect police resources and really affect the public. So that's all the things such as burglaries to your homes, businesses, colleges, schools, theft from your vehicle, theft of your vehicle, Section 47 assaults, break-ins to allotments, those kinds of jobs, all the way up to the much more serious, major and serious category crime, which are things like murder, robbery, rape, kidnap, serious and aggravated assaults, aggravated burglaries, those
yeah,
kinds of things, aren't there? So we look at the whole remit. And often on a day-to-day basis, particularly when we're going to those volume crime scenes, we work on our own. It's a real solo job. You get in, you get your job list, you get in your little van, and then that's you off for the day with all your kit and equipment going examining scenes. And of course you're meeting members of the public and you're talking to police officers on the radio and checking back with the team at the office and stuff. But you do spend a lot of time on your own, don't you?
Yeah, you do. You have to be able to work on your own initiative and be comfortable by yourself, don't you, to get on in this role?
Definitely. You've got to be able to like problem solve and think quite quickly on your feet as well, don't you?
Yeah,
Because when we get to the more major and serious category crimes, that's when we're working in teams, and usually there'd be like two or three of us at a scene.
yeah.
But still, I still think it is one of the best jobs in the world. Although, was it everything that you expected?
It wasn't everything that I expected. I think probably looking at the biggest, probably the shocks to the system is
Yeah,
probably what we're talking about. I loved it in lots of ways. Like you say, I think it is a great job. I think some of the shocks about it and things that I didn't expect, probably sometimes the environment that you're working it within the police force. It's a strange environment to other environments that you'll work in terms of like hierarchies and ranks, and then the difference between police officers to police staff. Uh,
yeah.
there's not many environments like it, is there?
No, that's one of the things we should clarify as well. And one of the reasons I was able to get in eventually. So once I finished university, it was because the role became a civilian role. So we were police staff. We were never police officers. We weren't what's the word? We weren't sworn in as officers.
Yeah.
It's
Which I think
it's
people are shocked to hear, actually, aren't they, a lot of the time?
Yeah, but because it became a civilian role, it meant that I didn't have to do the bleep test because you don't have to be able to run or have the same level of fitness as a police officer, which meant that my disability no longer was a significant issue, which
Yeah,
was brilliant for me. And I was, even though I have a disability, more than capable of doing the job. So it was a shame that I was held back for so many years. But
definitely.
the fact that the role was civilianized was great for me. So yeah, crime scene investigators these days are not police officers. You are police staff and you are a civilian working in a police force, which, like you say, is interesting and can be challenging at times, can't it?
Yeah, it's just a very different dynamic to where you work anywhere else. One of the other big shocks is I think I must have been quite sheltered. Some of the environments you go out into and realizing the way people live and things
Yes.
like that, um, and members of the public. You meet, like I think you mentioned before, you mentioned people from all walks of life, and we all live very different lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
You mean
think
you don't just get drunk on a night out and stab your friends?
oh, I have the occasional chew on the ear. It's amazing how many ear bite offs you get, isn't it?
Yeah, it is actually, yeah.
It hit the expectations in a lot of ways in terms of the variety, the interest, the getting out and about, all of that. But I think they were some of the things for me that I wasn't expecting that I experienced. How about yourself?
Yeah. I loved the job. There are times now when I still miss it. I was going to say I could still go back into the field, but actually I couldn't go into the field now with the changes that have been made with ISO and accreditation and stuff, because I think the role's become quite stifled. But that's a different subject for a different day. But I still miss it, and there are times when I still wish I could go and attend crime scenes, which I suppose is one of the reasons we did the mass disaster consultancy stuff, so that actually we could still do things practically and do some field work. But yeah, I do miss it. I miss the practical aspects. I miss the rewarding feeling of helping victims and working with victims. I miss the people that you meet on a day-to-day basis from all walks of life. And just the job itself, it just gives you a real insight into the world and life, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Although I have to say, it does make you at times a little bit cynical as well, which I don't think is a great thing.
No, not always.
We are a little bit cynical, aren't we? We don't trust quickly these days.
No.
Always quite suspicious. I'm not sure these are great characteristics, if I'm honest. But I didn't enjoy working for the police or in the police. I didn't enjoy the hierarchy or the some of the red tape. And like you say, yeah, I think my eyes were quite open. My life hadn't been that sheltered. I'd seen quite a lot of awful things from a young age. Then when I had my work placement at Cleveland Police, I still remember some of the crimes from then that I went to because I loved it so
Oh,
much.
wow.
One was just in a pub and it was a break into a fruit machine. One was a theft from vehicle. But then I did a really interesting one, which was an aggravated burglary. And then Gary Curry, he's a guy who turned out to be one of our lecturers, an amazing lecturer, and he's also going to be a
Yeah.
guest on this podcast at some point, isn't he?
Yeah.
He also does the intro and outro music for us as well. He created that, so thank you, Gary.
He does. Thanks, Gary.
He showed me, and he doesn't remember this meeting. I always wind him up about it, but I met him back then in the 90s, and he showed me a number of murder cases. He showed me one where a kid had been chopped up and put behind the bath, and where a doctor had been murdered as well. So I saw quite a lot of brutal cases quite early on. Working in the pub industry again opens your eyes up
Definitely.
but still at the same time, like you, I was shocked still by some of the things that I saw. Like, sometimes you just can't believe how people live. But I think
No,
more than that, for me, it was often more about how humans treat each other. Sometimes you wonder where people's humanity is. You
you
think, I
do.
wouldn't treat an animal like that. Like, how can you do that to another human being? And
Definitely.
I think that's where you become a bit cynical, don't you?
It is an interesting world, isn't it? And I think that's one of the things with the podcast that we're gonna explore and bring to people, isn't it? So we mentioned a few things there about kind of being shocked, the environments people live within and stuff. These are stories that we will share along the way. And as we're going through the different podcasts, we're going to focus on some crimes that we've worked on and things, but we will interject little stories and amusing bits that we've had throughout our time in the field as well, aren't we?
Most definitely, because there have been a lot.
Many. Many. We will share them a lot.
I think that might actually be quite a good place to wrap up this first episode. Do you?
I think so, yeah. So we hope to see you all again in 2 weeks' time for our next episode.
Yeah, thank you for listening.
Thank you.